Coaching blunders, special teams miscues. Feels like a great time for a bye week.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me as he does, along with our title sponsor, FanDuel, is my guy, Andrew Glukov from The Last Word on Sports. He's going to get the first word on this topic and on this game from Saturday. Andrew, it was a tough one. Now, we gave our picks based on our FanDuel spread pick Friday. I think Vegas nailed this one in terms of what kind of game this would be.
Well, they nailed the fact that Arizona State was going to pull out a win, but when you look at it, the offense didn't win the game, and UCF's defense didn't lose the game. So this was a strange. His first half was a very strange half, and that really set the stage for the rest of the game. I don't know about you, Mike, but I was pulling out what little hair I have left watching some of these blunders.
Yeah. Before we get into that, look, this was higher scoring than I thought it would be, but statistically, it was about where I thought it would be as far as yards gained from scrimmage. It was just points scored, especially on the other side of the ball, from miscues and coaching decisions.
Yeah, I mean, when it came down to it, I originally projected 34-24.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you take out the special teams issues, that's really what this came down to. The defense for UCF only gave like 3 legit touchdowns.
Yeah.
And so, that's exactly what we thought. Cam Scattaboo out.
Yep.
And Arizona State's offense suffered for it. I mean, I know we had some comments about how, we were off base on that, but numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
This was true. This is exactly how it played out. We called it. It happened. What we couldn't account for was what happened on the special teams, and that's a whole category in itself.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that, but you're absolutely right. His absence had the effect on this offense that we predicted it would have. Now, last week they had over 500 yards of offense, and he was 51% of their offense. Without him, they did not hit 300 yards of total offense in this one. His presence was missed. But look, coaching had a lot to do with how this one turned out. Now, a few weeks ago, they made a decision to fire the defensive coordinator and turn over play calling on offense to Tim Harris and change the quarterbacks. And I think it's time to revisit how that's affected both sides of the ball. Let's start on defense. You mentioned it. The defense didn't give up much in this one. The score didn't reflect it, but really only 21 of those points were on Addison's defense.
Correct. They took care of business. First half, much like against Arizona, the original Arizona, they shut them down in the first half. Now, granted, Arizona is not as good as Arizona State, but they do have some star players like Tedroy McMillan, and they kept him in check. Let's break down each half. First half, Arizona State had 103 yards of offense in the first half. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's fantastic.
Phenomenal.
You say what you want. That's phenomenal. That's what you got to do. And they only had 157 yards of offense in the second half. That's still really good.
Yeah.
In the end of the day, they scored 3 touchdowns on offense. One was in the first half, which led to some issues later we'll talk about. And then 2 in the second half. The second half was a much more evenly paced game between the two. And, it was 14-14 when the scores came down to it. Arizona State had the last laugh at the very end. They were able to finalize things. And, when you look at it that way, I thought Addison Williams did a great job. There weren't many deep plays. There should have been. there were a couple of really bad pass drops by Arizona State receivers. I mean, there was a couple of really egregious drops that should have been huge plays. But that's why they play the game. Even with those taken into consideration, this was still a really solid game. I mean, the rushing attack, shut down. They were not able to excel. They were not able to do what they did with Scadaboo on the field. They ended up with 99 yards total. And, even though UCF lost, I'll take 99 yards of rushing defense, rushing yards given up any day of the week. Even the passing yards, 161, still not bad. I think from a standpoint, you have to look at some of this with a silver lining. They lost the game with freak accidents, freak situations, but they won the game on fundamentals. And this is a team, granted, they were built for win now, and they're going to have to rebuild for next year with a lot of key spots. But I think you're seeing the foundation of the coaching staff. Addison Williams this is not the same Coach Williams who was defensive coordinator last year. This guy knows how to run the front seven now.
You mentioned the drops there. PFF credited Jordan Tyson with a drop. They also credited Jake Smith with a drop, on Arizona State side. I thought that there were a couple more that could have been drops. This is a funny category to score. Only a few sites actually log this statistic. But there were obviously some missed opportunities there, from Arizona State. But I thought that this game was more about what UCF did or didn't do than it was anything that Arizona State did. So, jumping to the offensive side of the ball here and talking about coaching, look, the decision from the 1 yard line there at the end of the first, that one stung to me. It stood out. In a game like this, when Vegas says it's a 4-point spread, these decisions always seem to make or break these games. And I know we can point back at, what if this, what if that, but passing the ball at the 1 yard line when you could have just run the clock out.
I'm totally on board with you on that. That one was, again, pulling out what little hair I have left.
Yeah.
You have, even though RJ Harvey had a rough first half, I mean, it was 12 carries for 35 yards. That's not Harvey-esque. He had a much better second half. But you still have to trust your running backs. Miles Montgomery actually played really well in the first half as a change of pace guy. Had a pair of 13-yard runs in there. He did his job where Harvey was struggling. They were able to bring in Montgomery and do something. Even at that, without Harvey having a strong half, you run the ball up the middle, you get a yard, but you allow that to help set up to run the clock out. There wasn't much clock left. You were nursing a 3-point lead. Just, you take that special teams blunder that we'll get into, that happened the play before, dust yourself off and just take it to the half. Yeah, Arizona State scored a touchdown. They're getting the second half kick, but there just wasn't enough time to really do anything. Just run it out, hit the reset button, go to the next half. That played a pivotal role in how this game ended. Just that one mistake of a play call. And here's the truth. Tim Harris actually had a pretty good called game.
Yeah.
Dylan Risk, coming in this, first road game as a starter and all that jazz. It was talked about yesterday, but they game planned for a lot of back shoulder throws, and it worked. Jacoby Jones was a first down conversion machine. I kid you not. Between third and fourth down, he had 6 catches that were converted into first downs out of 7. He basically was getting constant third and fourth down passes, and he was catching them. They were largely back shoulder throws near the sideline. And you know what? If you don't like these play calls, find a way to stop them. But if they're working, keep using them. And they were safe, they were short, they were efficient. He threw for 80%, close to 80% in the first half. It tapered off in the second. He struggled a bit, went through a little bit of a cold spell with 3 incompletions in a row that absolutely just killed a drive in good field position. But overall, it was a good offensive game plan. I know fans are just fed up with the Gus Malzahn experiment, but this was not a badly coached game from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, you're just not good enough to make the types of mistakes that they made and still win games. Arizona State's having a really good season. Again, with Scadaboo out, there was an opportunity here maybe to steal one on the road against a very good team. And defensively, they were up to the task. Offensively, they moved the ball. Like you said, I liked the plan for the passing game, but key mishaps and missed opportunities led to the loss here. Special teams left a lot to be desired in this one. We're going to talk about what UCF could or couldn't have done on special teams right after a quick word from our sponsors. Fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app. Now, you've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they are revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, Andrew, to have a say in who gets the NIL money that you want it to go to. So, who's your favorite player? Is your player RJ Harvey? I know, right? Don't make me, right? I know RJ is probably my player of the year. He's not going to get the credit I think that he's due, because Ashton Gency's having a great season, but I think that what RJ Harvey's doing stands out to me. Scadaboo was obviously having a great season. RJ Harvey is my Roy player of the year. Who's your Roy player of the year so far?
Oh, it's got to be RJ Harvey. He's currently tied second in the nation in rushing. And he, unlike Genty, he's in a committee and still second in the nation.
Well, you could throw some money Roy Harvey's way. Look, every contribution counts. $10, $20, it all adds up, and it's going to help your favorite players stay put where they're at. Join me and Andrew and show RJ Harvey some love. Download the Roy app or go to join at roy.com today. Use promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase is necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Missed field goals, punt blocks. It was Murphy's Law in special teams on Saturday. But I want to start with the punt block there. Before we started recording, we talked about the 2-man shield. You talked about the 2-man shield that was there. There was a completely blown block there that led. It felt like maybe there was nothing the punter could have done differently other than make a really athletic heads-up play to avoid the block and then still kick it. Special teams felt like it cost them here.
I can't blame the punter on that one. His job is not to be an acrobat. Granted, he got upended because that block was so effective. There was actually a person who posted on one of the UCF Facebook groups who complained that it should have been a penalty because it was such a hard hit. No, that's a block punt. You're allowed to do that. And that's just how bad it was. Here's the thing. It's not the first time I've seen UCF use a 2-man shield. And I think the first time caused them some trouble too. They should be always running a 3-man shield. In fact, they did it the rest of the game. Here's the interesting thing about UCF and special teams. They do not have a dedicated special teams coordinator. They have Brian Blackman, who's the special teams coordinator and tight ends coach. So as a result, you don't have the same focus on special teams. I think this may be something Gus may want to reconsider in the offseason, especially because there's more money in the assistant coach pool. They may want to focus on getting a special teams only coach that can work on this stuff, can work on the kicking game, can work on the punt blocking, and teaching their kick returners what to do and what not to do when things go wrong on kickoffs.
Yeah, it was tough watching that be returned. Again, your margin for error in this one, I'm always amazed at how right Vegas gets this one in terms of like how close the game is going to be. And so when you give up a special teams touchdown like that in that fashion, it stings, right? And again, the small decisions that are made, like you said, does special teams need more of a focused, effort from the coaching perspective to help avoid these things? Look, at the end of the day, special teams is one of those things that can really make you nervous when it's not going well. And when it's a disaster, it's a whole disaster for you. I felt like special teams was a whole disaster. Now, outside of the punt block, you had 2 missed field goals. You pointed out before we started recording the 46-yarder, I believe it was, dinged off the upright. And
then the 57-yarder was at the end of the half.
Yeah,
that was halftime. That was instead of trying to Hail Mary. And you know what? That was pretty close too. It had the distance. It was just a little bit off target. That's a hard one. This is a young kid. I thought the 57-yarder was the right move. Like, what else are you gonna do? Plus, the missed other kick, hit a 45-yarder earlier in the game. I thought it was the right move to trot out Grant Reddick when they did. He's young. He's new to being the guy, stepped in mid-season after Colton Boomer left the program. And, I don't think he's done a bad job. Coming into this game, his long was 38, in an actual game atmosphere. So this was tough. The first kick was a little shaky. I thought the other two actually looked better. The ones that didn't go in looked better from a mechanics standpoint. They just, went a little off. And, football's a game of inches. I don't blame the missed kicks. That's part of the game. The punt block and the kick return blunder, that's all coaching. You set up the failure of the block. You did not properly instruct your returner what to do in a situation where he catches the ball or drops the ball in the end zone. It's a freshman. And I thought it set up the rest of the game because the fans are already in a fever pitch.
Yeah.
The block punt really got them going because that tied the game at 7. UCF pulled ahead. They just, Arizona State then just scores a touchdown right before halftime. It's 17-14. And then you have this happen. And then the fans are just out of this world. And if you remember, one of my 3 keys to the game was take the crowd out
of the game.
All special teams did was put the crowd back
in the game. Yeah.
It was just absolutely terrible.
And it was an ASU crowd at that, like one of the worst crowds ever.
Tell me how you really feel.
I'm an ASU hater. Like that. It was a very forgettable fan experience going to an ASU game. But look, obviously, missed opportunities on special teams that cost you in a game. That the line moved in this one. It started out at 4 and then moved to 2.5 by game time. So it was tough watching this one. I'm with you on this one. It's hard to blame the punters and the kickers in this one, but execution. If you execute on the block, maybe you win this game because you don't give up that touchdown and you force them way back there, at the end of there were some opportunities. And they're going to, maybe this is the right time for a bye week, which we're going to talk about after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Andrew, I mentioned that the line moved. It just kept moving. Vegas kept trying to get people to bet the other side of the line here. If you took Arizona State, -2.5 is where it was at game time, you won money. If you took UCF in the points, you lost the money in this one. This was tough. It was tough to watch. But look, no matter what side of the line you bet on, do it with our friends at FanDuel. Go check them out, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. UCF has their second bye week of the season. You've got to finish this thing strong. They've got West Virginia and Utah to close out their 2024 campaign. Still an opportunity to make a bowl game. I feel like they have to get there. What are your bye week bullet points, Andrew, if you're Gus Malzahn?
Penalties. Yeah, UCF had 5 false start penalties
Oh,
last week.
9 total penalties for 80 yards in this.
Yeah, and on 2 different occasions, you had back-to-back false start penalties. I mean, no excuse for that.
Yeah.
So, work on the silent. You're going to Morgantown. You think Arizona State's a tough place to play?
At Morgantown.
You're going to West Virginia, where couches are an endangered species from all the burning that happens. This is not an easy place to play. I'd rather play in Tempe than in Morgantown as far as a visiting quarterback or a visiting team. So you know what? Work on the silent count. Move on ball, not on call. You gotta get that internal cadence down, and you gotta have that peripheral vision to be able to see that ball move. There are no excuses for these kind of false starts.
Yeah, it's you clean it. It's everything that they need to clean it. It feels like it's procedural, right? Execute the simple things.
It's fundamentals.
Understand your blocking assignments, right? Like execute the simple things, and the coaches have to help them out as well too. So situational play calling kills teams week after week. So you call a great game, but then in a tight moment, you make an incredulous call. And in a game like Saturday, there were so many things you could point to where one decision might have won UCF the game. And this is why I think that fans are kind of over the Gus Malzahn era. It just feels like these things have plagued them in key moments, and fans are over it. And if you're Gus, you've got to show them that you can overcome that. I thought he took some great steps by handing off the play calling, firing his defensive coordinator, and going with Dylan Risk. All those things have paid off. Are there a couple more things that you can do over these last 2 games to get you the rest of the way there?
Well, I think you're right. He definitely made strides in basically firing himself as play caller and putting in Tim Harris. Tim Harris is, other than that one questionable call, Tim Harris is largely called a good couple of games.
Yeah, I've been impressed.
I do like the fact that he adjusts to what the defense gives him. If something's not working, he pivots. But if something is working, he keeps going back to it. It keeps working. So you know what? Until they can stop it, you keep using it. The back shoulder throw worked wonderfully well for Dylan Risk and Kobe Hudson, and especially Jacoby Jones. Jones and Risk have a great chemistry, and they need to continue to exploit that. And, if Hudson ends up being more of a decoy at times so that Jones can make some explosive plays, okay, so be it. Sometimes the best receiver doesn't get the ball, but he does do important stuff. Hudson, finally climbed back up to the top receiver this passing by, I think it was 1 yard difference between the two, same number of receptions. But the thing is, that's what defense is going to key on, because that's what they saw in the film. So they're going to have to be willing to add another wrinkle. Dylan Risk has the best grasp on the playbook of all the UCF quarterbacks. So I'm very confident that he'll rise up to that occasion. But Tim Harris is going to have to be ready to change it up a little bit based on the fact that they're going to have, even though West Virginia still has, games to play, they're going to have that week to plan based on what the Arizona State film tells them.
Yeah, look, bye week's always a great opportunity to pull it together. So, go back to the drawing board, see what works, get rid of what doesn't, and focus on your strengths over these last 2 games. UCF still has something to play for here. I think making a bowl game would be huge for the morale of this team, and ending the season on a strong note with some momentum headed into a bowl game if you can win the last 2. You said it, Morgantown is a difficult place to go play. I think one of the more underrated road experiences in all of college football. Going there and getting a win would be really impressive for this team where they're at. Look, always impressive is my friend Andrew Glucko joining me here on Locked On UCF, sponsored by our friends at FanDuel. Before we get out of here, Andrew, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, at StatBoyDrew, and catch my writings on the Last Word of College Football, which is part of the Last Word on Sports Family.
Thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends over at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and holds no punches when it comes to covering every team in the Big 12. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us right here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.